Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce's 2022 Legislative Conference. Thank you to our signature sponsor, Germanna Community College, and our legislative sponsor, the Culpeper Star Exponent, for helping make today possible. I'm Jeff Say, President and CEO of the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce, and we're excited to have some wonderful panelists here to share about what is important in our community, what we're looking for from our legislators coming up in the General Assembly in 2023. We're hopefully having some more of our folks join us. We see that James Menitz from Senator Bryce Reeves' office is joining us. I know that Nick Freitas is going to be joining us today, and Mike Wiebert has mentioned that they'll be joining as well. So look forward to them. I know, unfortunately, Senator Joe Vogel is unable to attend today. However, we are taping this on Culpeper Media Network, and it will be shared on Culpeper Media Network and also on the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce website. So thank you all today. This is a wonderful opportunity to let folks know about what is important to our businesses, to our nonprofits, to all of our organizations here in Culpeper County, as we have a lot of wonderful voices that are able to share what we are looking for from our legislators as we enter the 2023 General Assembly. So starting us off today is presenting on behalf of Education and Workforce, Dr. Janet Gullickson from Germanna Community College. As I mentioned, Germanna is our signature sponsor today. Thank you, Dr. Gullickson, for your continued partnership and for all the work that you do in helping educate our students as they're coming out of high school, as they're going back into the workforce, and helping prepare them to be the workforce of the future. Dr. Gullickson, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for this opportunity. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. I'm from the Midwest, so rain is a blessing. Well, I'm very happy to see it raining out today again. Really appreciate you taking your time to be here this morning. I know you have many other places to go. I especially appreciate the representation from our leadership in the House of Delegates and Senate in Virginia. And I want to thank you and your staff for leading us and negotiating all of those difficult things that go with governing. You are an effective body, a set of effective bodies, and I appreciate that very much. So thank you for that too. I want to set a context for you before I do my little presentation. I've been involved in higher education in Minnesota, South Dakota, Washington State, and Colorado. I will say, based on my experience in Washington State and Minnesota, that Virginia is really not ready to compete on this whole workforce demand area that we're in the middle of right now. Hearing from employers, $300,000 jobs not filled. And the reason we are not prepared right now to compete is that the investment in Virginia's community colleges, particularly in the workforce area, has not been what it has been, for example, in Minnesota and Washington State. Colorado has a very similar situation in its workforce developed to Virginia. And part of the reason for that is, just like Virginia, Colorado did not fund career technical education as a separate kind of tranche in the budget. Rather, it just dumped money on the college's doorstep, and it wasn't enough money to do career technical education. So we offered a whole lot of English courses. And so if you go across the state in Virginia Community colleges, you will find very little infrastructure to do the kind of middle skills jobs that we need. It's a little better in Southwest Virginia because they've had some of the tobacco money over time, and they have some big employers that have invested. But generally in the community colleges in Virginia, there is very little infrastructure to skill up the workforce the way the governor wants and the way the rest of us want as well. And that is a really important thing to know. For example, in Minnesota, if I had a heavy truck and diesel program many years ago, I would have gotten $18,000 from the state many years ago to train that student and educate that student. In Virginia, I get the same amount of money to educate a heavy truck and diesel mechanic as I would to educate an English major, and substantially less than the $18,000 I got 20 years ago to do heavy truck and diesel repair. So we are starting, to give an idea, and there's a lot of graphs I could show you about that, but I want you to understand that we are starting from a supreme deficit. I was just at a conference this last week with educators from North Carolina, Texas, a variety of other states, and they get millions of dollars to build not just the careers education infrastructure. By that I mean the equipment, the supplies, the ability to hire instructors that who we compete with industry to hire, but also in terms of just the buildings that they offer to their students to offer these courses. So I just want to level set everyone on this, that Virginia doesn't have the money, our competition does, to do what our competition does. So I have a solution though. I have a big old solution. It's only going to cost about $250 million. But if you think about this, if we don't do this investment now, I will tell you that there is very little that will help, that we can do much differently to help with this 300,000 job gap. So I'm going to just show you a couple things right here, just get your attention. So in this state, you will see the VCCS come to you for a big ask, a really big ask. Usually we come to the legislature and say, can we have $40 million, please? Can we have $40 million, please? Can we have $40 million? As we sit around and try to meet the demands of the infrastructure needs of our communities, $40 million, $50 million ain't gonna cut it. And the reason, as I said before, is we don't have the equipment, the instructors, the facilities that we need to do the education that we need. And that's why we're coming to you with this large ask. And we prefer to think of it as an investment. Obviously, 300,000 unfilled jobs, we have low unemployment, so there's not much that we can do in terms of enticing students to leave work to come to school, so scholarships become more important. The labor force participation is dropping. Finally, us boomers are leaving, but we have to be replaced. And then some of the things we train for and educate for in Virginia, for example, four-year baccalaureate liberal arts majors, which is an important major, I'm not dismissing that, doesn't necessarily, those majors don't necessarily meet the needs of Virginia's unfilled jobs. So we have a solution. It's called Virginia Community College Systems Higher Virginia. Basically, what we're asking for is the supports for our students and for our facilities and equipment budgets so that we can actually train for those middle skills jobs. And I'll give you an example of what Germanna is doing right now. Germanna has already put in place that all of our students will have some sort of work-based learning while they're in school so that they know how to work on the first day of the job. And we want to focus across the state, not just at Germanna, on middle skills jobs with associate degrees or training and certificates. I was at Micron a few weeks ago, and the person who ran the chips part of their industry, which is a major part, said, we have 30% engineers, but we need 70% of what you can do in mechatronics. I can't do much right now in mechatronics. I don't have the equipment. And by the way, Virginia is in a very good place to compete for the federal CHIPS Act as well as the infrastructure money. But we're going to need some investment in our higher education to make that work. Remember, Micron, 30% engineers, 70% workers, like I turn out, 90%. So this is what the $250 million is about. This is what we're asking for. First, right now, we have G3 and some other great scholarship fast forward coming directly to our students to help them pay for tuition. We need more of that. Our students will not leave their new jobs, their current jobs, even if they're low paying, to come to school if they can't afford it. So that's really what we need is really more scholarship money. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, and this is the big ask, we need about $100 million to really modernize our labs, build the labs, classroom learning experiences. Part of what we're asking for is our employer partners to help match this so that we can really gear up and build the kind of educational system that Virginia needs right now. By the way, there's a warehouse just down the road from Germanna, one of Germanna's campuses, that is just ripe for building a career technical education center. Just keep that in mind when somebody asks you for 100 million. We have the facilities in mind, we just don't have the money. Dual enrollment's interesting. The governor is really emphasizing dual enrollment. I appreciate that. In fact, I appreciate a lot of what the governor is doing in workforce development. But right now, dual enrollment compared to Minnesota, again, compared to Washington State, again, is a loser for community colleges. By that, I mean, we really don't make any money helping dual enroll students. In fact, we lose money dual enrolling students. So what we need is to really bolster dual enrollment, not just for the English majors among us, but also for career technical people, so that we get the funds that we need to build that infrastructure that I discussed earlier. So if we want to have high schoolers leave jobs or leave high school ready to work, we're going to need an investment. We're running an experimental program right now at Germanna where students are able to enroll in cybersecurity jobs for free, high school students, and it is extremely popular. Think about what we could do if we had more money in dual enrollment. So the other thing we need is the career services. And I mentioned earlier that Germanna is becoming a work-based learning college. We want every student that leaves Germanna to have a work-based experience, either getting a resume done all the way through an apprenticeship. That takes a fair amount of coordination. That is not something that happens just through a handshake. And so we need an infrastructure so that students know where to go and employers know where to go to find them. We're very excited about the career placement opportunities that we could have, because right now Germanna is building it kind of out of matchsticks, but we truly believe that it's necessary. So we're figuring out how to do it, but it's surely not the high quality experience employers and students might anticipate. Advising is really important. We have many students. In fact, most of our students come to us uncertain of what they want to do. They haven't seen maybe blue collar, pink collar, white collar, plaid collar workers in their lives. They don't know about the various occupations. Go home and ask your kids about what mechatronics is. They probably know, but we don't know. So we really need some career advising for students. We also want career advising so that some of their past learning, maybe they're already in a job and they want to upskill, that we give them credit for that. And so credit for prior learning is also a big part of what Germanna and other colleges across the BCCS are doing. It is impossible to understate what COVID did to mental health across our country. And I see it among our employers, employees, you might see it as well, but I particularly see it among students. Not only that, but students in Virginia, as well as other states, have lost almost 2 years of education in their high school or K-12 experience. That 10-year kind of lag will be with us for a long time. So we're going to have to work with students to be sure they have a mental health mindset to conquer the barriers that may have come because they missed really about 2 years of education. We currently offer a service called Timely Care throughout Virginia. We did it as an experiment. It's highly successful. We don't really have plans to continue to fund it without your help. So this is a 24/7 virtual service that our students use like gangbusters. Not only that, but it allows our faculty to have some sort of referral for our students who are really suffering. And so it's really, the return on this investment is enormous. And finally, we want to do something so that people know that VCCS is the higher ed, which means you can go to VCCS schools and you can eventually get a job, or you can come to VCCS schools and find the employee that you need. So $250 million, you've seen the breakdown here. I really can't emphasize enough that Virginia is behind in terms of infrastructure investment in career technical education. We're doing some stuff that's very creative, for example, with CTEC at Culpeper using their facilities. We're working with the Spotsylvania Career Tech Center and the Spotsylvania schools, but that really is not where our adult population wants to go. Higher ed, look for it. You're going to be lobbied like crazy on it, but it really is what's needed right now to do what we all want to do, which is give our sons, our daughters, our neighbors, people we know, people we don't know, jobs that allow them to be steadily employed while meeting employer needs. Now, I think I have a few minutes for questions. Jeff, is that correct?
Yes, so if we have any questions from the legislators for Dr. Gullickson, we will open that up now. And Dr. Gullickson, thank you, because I think that was wonderful information and very eye-opening.
Thank you. And I think, Jeff, I did send the presentation and just more detail about this ask to Amy, so it could be on your website if you want.
Absolutely, and we'll share it out with attendees and panelists as well.
Thank you.
Hearing no questions.
Oh, Jeff, sorry, this is Nick Freitas.
Delegate Freitas, thank you for joining us today. I will let you have the floor. Go right ahead.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for hosting. I definitely like to see more details. I probably have way more questions than we can fit into this event, but I thank you for the presentation. I will say, as we discuss more about this potentially offline and whatnot, one of the concerns we have is $250 million is a big ask. I certainly understand, the necessity of trying to be more competitive within the technical career education. We've carried legislation on this. One of the concerns I get from a lot of my constituents is there has been an enormous investment in higher ed. Now, I think it's been disproportionately not given to the community colleges. And so I'm very open to finding ways that we get some greater parity on that. And I've carried some legislation before to try to open up tag grants and things like that for certification training, non-certification training, a lot of things that would be handled through the community colleges. As you can imagine, I get a lot of pushback from other higher education institutions. And so I do think when we look at spending more money, there has been a lot invested, and people are getting I get a lot of calls from constituents. They want to see a lot more on what is being produced on the other end. And so as we talk about this some more, I would love to see some numbers on how we think investment in this area is going to produce not just people attending, which I think is very important, but the corresponding jobs that come afterwards. So we don't find ourselves in a position where we're once again debating whether or not, on the federal level, they're going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars forgiving student loan debt. That's become a real concern. So again, I think where you're focusing and where you're asking for the money makes a lot of sense because those are a lot of jobs that right off the bat you have marketability. But there's going to be some pretty hard questions of higher ed going forward on how we ensure that the money that we're taking from people and then giving to higher ed is then turning out people that are coming out with certifications, credentialing, degrees that are going to be able to get them good jobs, help them pay back loans and things of that nature. But I thank you very much for the presentation and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. One thing that, if I could brag a little bit about Germanna. Germanna during COVID grew in enrollment. We're one of the few colleges in the country that did that. We actually increased in the last 5 years enrollment by 15%. And we've increased enrollment in populations that we didn't have previously. So we used your investment, and it is an investment, to continue to grow our college, and we have reinvested those tuition dollars back into the college and really eked out a tremendous amount of efficiency. We're one of the most efficient community colleges in the state, probably in the country. I just want to give you this little example, if you would just take this with you, and I'll reach out to you, Delegate Freitas, so we can talk in person. A few years back, I went to Virginia Tech, and I was given a tour to it, and maybe some of you have seen it, in a building that had a room that was it was a black box. It was totally black. No light could penetrate it. It was like they had hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment surrounding it so they could test stuff and sound waves and all that stuff, which is really important research work. It really is. That lab, which cost more than I ever get for equipment, or have gotten probably since I started 5.5 years ago, is used by maybe 12 graduate students. So I really support accountability across the higher ed system. And I think we'll get that with the hard questions that you're asking, Delegate Frida. So thank you very much.
No, I certainly appreciate that. And again, I'm not in any way implying that Germanna has not been wise with respect to how they use resources. I'm saying that it's more of a question that is increasingly being asked of higher education. I was recently at an education summit in Roanoke, and it was just a foregone conclusion that tuition has gone up, and so therefore taxpayers should contribute more. And there's a lot of pushback on, well, taxpayers want to see, taxpayers want to make sure that the investment is actually producing good results. And again, I think with institutions like Germanna, I've been very impressed with how you have worked with our high school students, how you have worked with companies and industries within Virginia that are looking for qualified employees. So again, it's more of kind of a general statement, and I'm certainly aware of some of the issues that we have with some of our big four-year universities. So again, I've carried legislation 3 years in a row now to try to make sure that you guys were actually qualifying for some of the grants that kind of just by default go to higher ed. And so I'd love to work with you more on how we achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas, and thank you, Dr. Gullickson. I will share that we do have a comment from our attendees. Town Councilman Short asks regarding Germanna, considering a technical education center, is there a relationship between Germanna and Culpeper CTech? And then he asks, is dual enrollment is a huge benefit to our local skilled trade oriented students and for families that struggle with the cost of high school education. And he just thanks you for making that availability to our community. So Dr. Gullickson, just real quick, can you just really briefly touch on that relationship between Germanna and CTech and Culpeper County Public Schools?
Thank you for asking that question. We have a great relationship with CTech. It was actually built, I think, in part with that relationship in mind. So for example, we offer our automotive program on their site. We don't have another site for our automotive program. We're partnering on healthcare programs. We're also partnering on heavy equipment operator programs. We are lucky to have that CTech center in our community. Couldn't speak highly enough about Superintendent Brad or Jackie, or sorry, yes, Jackie. But we can do more. And I appreciate the fact too that you have dual enrollment in mind, because I think that's something we're asking for some support on too. And thank you for your compliment, Mr. Short. Right, so Randy Let's-Richards, sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Gullickson. Appreciate all the answers, all the information. Once again, always so informative. We appreciate your partnership, and we appreciate Germanna being our signature sponsor here today. Now we will move along to Paige Reed from the town of Culpeper, who's presenting on behalf of economic development. I have known Paige, I think, since she came to Culpeper. She is a fellow 2016 LEAD Culpeper graduate, and her and I were in the same class. And she is just a wealth of information and does so much in promoting our community, promoting our town, our county, has been working and bringing state parks to Culpeper County. And she is very involved in several entities in Richmond and think tanks, and being able to bring that information back to Culpeper and how that impacts our community. So we're going to hear more about economic development from Paige Reed. Paige, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. So I'm doing this both on economic development and tourism. So I wear both hats, and I'm very fortunate to do so because they really are hand in glove together. Okay, Amy's putting up my screen. Thank you, Amy. As you know, economic development is really charged with everything: creating an inclusive economy, investing in our community's prosperity and sustainability, creating vibrancy and competitiveness, attracting new and expanding businesses, job creation, revenue generation. And we play an important role in the socioeconomic fabric of our communities. Economic development and tourism truly touches all aspects of life in our world: land use, affordable housing, workforce and talent, the creative class, entrepreneurship, taxes, access to capital. 6 degrees of separation barely begins to scratch the surface of the myriad of factors impacting our ability to position our communities for competitive investment and to build our local economies in a diversified and sustainable way. So I kind of built my program, my presentation this morning, a little bit different than Dr. Gullickson. And thank you very much, Dr. Gullickson. You did a beautiful job and to advocate for your industry. Advocating for economic development and tourism, it's, just pick the path that you want to choose. So much of it is layered. So there's really not one injection into state funding. There's not one injection into local funding that can truly move everything. It really has to be that puzzle when it all comes together. So to that, economic development and tourism, it's a team sport. We work with every type of partner. We work with private, nonprofit, government, hybrid, all of the above. In Virginia government alone, here are a handful of the agencies that affect our work. Some of them are the obvious: Virginia Economic Development Partnership, Virginia Tourism, Department of Housing and Community Development. Some that might not be so obvious: Historic Resources, State Corporation Commission, DEQ. But every project, every business, every investment has a comprehensive list of agencies and partners that helped make it happen. Culpeper is the 5th largest town in Virginia. It's in the top 10 fastest growing towns in Virginia, even competing against some of our cities. And we're one of the top 20 fastest growing counties in the Commonwealth. Our projected population growth is 2x of the state average through 2050, and that comes with opportunities and challenges. We could spend a lot more than we have today to talk about the factors impacting economic development and tourism. But in an effort to keep on schedule, I will stick to a couple of broad factors, followed by a snapshot of just a couple of community projects that are really making a positive impact in Culpeper and our region. So to kind of start off in perfect fashion, following Dr. Gullickson, I want to touch on workforce and talent. We know this is a nationwide challenge. COVID disrupted the workplace. And as we continue to move forward, we are seeing the semi-permanent and permanent changes that stem from COVID. More and more, almost every week, we're hearing private sector's adoption of the 4-day work week, how that's going to shuffle and play out with housing and education and childcare. Time will tell. The vacillation surrounding remote work in all areas of work, the TikTok economy, the gig economy, all of these external factors, those of us in local government and economic development and tourism practitioners really have very little control over. So in the town of Culpeper, our labor participation rate is 70.2%. The county has a 64% participation rate. Combined, our civilian labor force is roughly 35,766 people. All in all, Culpeper is doing well post-pandemic. We saw an increase of 3.5% in employment over the year ending in 2022, Q2. But that's not to say that our partners, our major employers, and our small businesses are not in need. Every single one of them are. We hear this all the time. Jeff hears this. We have roundtable discussions with this. We have small business council discussions with this. It is a critical need, whether it's just participation rate or whether it's the proper skills or the interest in work, that need is evident across the board. As Dr. Gullickson mentioned, in Culpeper, our career and technical education school is doing extremely well. Principal Summer Scales has programming ranging from automotive technology, culinary, masonry, cosmetology, cybersecurity, drafting, emergency medical tech, healthcare tech, and so much more. They are partnering with Germanna Community College. They're partnering with our communities, businesses, and major employers to really be able to hone those skills and those credentials that will make that growing population, our new population coming into the workforce, more ready to get going. Culpeper is also home to the new Pathways Center, which is a career and technical education facility located at the Carver campus, focused on machining school skills, CNC milling apprenticeships, and the National Institute of Metalworking Skills credentials. We all know Daniel Technology Center, part of the Germanna Community College family. There's a manufacturing technology lab, a computer technology lab, and training suites for customized workforce training. And I agree with Dr. Gullickson. There could be some funding to really be able to support the infrastructure and the equipment necessary to meet the demands for those skills today. But before I move on from workforce, these are what you have on the screen is a lot of the state programs that are supplying that support, whether it's the Virginia Jobs Investment Program through VEDP that we offer to our major employers. It's the most widely used program, or the Virginia Talent Accelerator Program, which is a newer program at the state level. And this program is really unique because it rapidly reskills an area's workforce to the exact requirements of a new or expanding employer through training that is fully customized to their unique process, equipment, and procedures. So that program is a little bit more focused on attracting high growth industries, including manufacturers that could really come into rural areas such as Culpeper in our region. Talent Pathways, this is again a newer program with Go Virginia, and we're really excited about this at Go Virginia, and it's going to encourage to support workforce related collaboration. And what I like about this is they're kind of talking about, making that movement from learning to earning more efficient and affordable by aligning that curricula directly with the employer needs and really finding that nexus between the business itself, the educational organizations, and where government can actually add to that process and support that process to be more streamlined. Fast forward, that is being implemented in our Virginia community college systems. It's that short-term workforce training program for these really high in-demand jobs. And these, I think I'm safe in saying these are the middle skilled jobs that Dr. Gullickson was referencing. These are the essential fields that don't require a college degree. And then I want to say that I'm pretty excited about the newly formed Virginia Office of Education Economies. So they're working on this really amazing comprehensive data dashboard right now that's going to answer a series of research questions. What it's going to do is it's really going to empower policymakers at the local and state level to be able to understand and to answer questions about the education and the labor market needs. So it's going to give us a better insight into the path of when the workforce development happens, the education and the private industry needs, and where those gaps are, and finding ways to better be able to fill those. So I know that they're getting closer and closer to launching that dashboard. I saw a sneak peek recently with Go Virginia, and there's some great information coming. Okay, so next up, sorry, Amy, I didn't trigger you. Next up, I want to chat a little bit about infrastructure. So economies cannot sustain and cannot grow without a proper foundation. There are numerous external factors regarding infrastructure. Consumer price index, interest rates, for example, again, those are things that we have very little influence over. Things that we do have influence over, some of the things listed here that you can look at are ones that we in local economic development and tourism heavily rely on and are heavily impacted by in our efforts within our communities. Just to touch on Culpeper sites, land development. Here in Culpeper, we have 4 tier 4 sites, 6 tier 2 sites, and 1 tier 1 site. These range from 30 to 300 plus acres. We also have roughly about 14 uncharacterized sites, a handful of which are more micro sites with less than 10 acres each. The site development programs at VEDP and Go Virginia, they're very strong. I still believe that there's some hurdles that are not reaching rural communities, and not even just rural communities, but aren't truly servicing all of the communities that it could. Most of those programs require a minimum acreage, contiguous acreage, and that typically comes in at 100 acres. Some areas there's funding for 50-acre sites. And I appreciate that. And I know that, at a state level, we need to be as competitive as possible to be able to move the entire needle for the Commonwealth forward. But when you drill it down into that equitable distribution throughout all of our communities, there isn't ready-made 100 to 250 acre sites throughout every community. And so if we want to be able to help all of our communities move forward, I do believe there's opportunity to kind of just review and maybe assess some of those criteria to be able to access those funds, to be able to move our sites to more shovel-ready tier 5 sites, which would really, in essence, result in conversion. So VATI, everybody's been talking broadband, since the pandemic, and Laura Loveday here in the county is managing Culpeper's VATI grant extremely well with All Points Broadband. There's always hiccups in new programming, especially programming that gets expedited into, the industry, but they've got a good pulse on that. And the next 18 months, we'll see some results. So we're pretty excited about that. And we thank you for that continued support of this program, knowing that really addressing that last 20% of customers is critical for workforce, for those that are doing remote work. And also, for the potential of land use, bringing broadband into those areas, future land use could open up for whether it's commercial or industrial. Transportation. Yeah, it's an essential component of economic development and tourism. We need the continued support from state and federal funding programs such as Smart Scale and revenue sharing, especially when it comes to the secondary road system. Our growing transportation needs and the deterioration of critical transportation infrastructure, roads and bridges, is creating detrimental impacts to the economic vitality and the safety across our communities. And there are so many programs. We could spend all day just talking transportation programs. And it's really nice because they do have their own little lanes that they focus on: Smart Scale, revenue, TAP, and then additional when it comes to diversifying for multimodal and rail and everything else. But the funding, it's always it's just there. It's just enough, or we have to wait for the next round. And so those programs, we cannot, in local communities, we cannot manage this without that support at the state and federal money. So it's really, truly critical for everything in local government. Energy. Yeah, well, so you thought broadband was a big conversation. Energy is today's conversation. It's gaining big support in Virginia and beyond. Governor Youngkin's 2022 energy plan, I really enjoyed a lot that's in there. Support of a lot of the data that came from that. Biden's recently announced $550 million community-based clean energy initiative, the 10 million Virginia Power Innovation Fund. Couple this with the advancements in technology and the proof of concept in clean energy generation, I'm very hopeful that we're going to start to see major disruption in this target sector. Currently here in Culpeper, we have investors that are interested in this space for Culpeper, but we're facing tremendous challenges when it comes to accessing the grid. So yes, we've got the technology, we have the private investment, we've got the land, we've got everybody kind of all of these green lights. And yet in Virginia, we have trouble taking that new generation and bringing it back onto the grid. Access to the grid is a major challenge. Access to capital is also a challenge. So I'm really, really excited to see the results of the energy plan, possibly helping to eliminate some of those grid barriers. I'm excited to learn more about how to access the funds, whether it's, Biden's 550 or even just the 10 million that Youngkin recently announced in November, which kind of leads me to the big BIL, the bipartisan infrastructure law. This is looking to inject once in a generation investment into our nation's infrastructure. And as of November of 2022, roughly $4.3 billion is headed to Virginia, $3.6 billion for transportation, over $120 million for clean water, roughly $82 million for clean energy, and it goes on. But as a locality, we need help from the state with communication on how to access these funds. I have like 50 Google alerts, along with many others, and I could spend all day reading, but I don't have all day to read. So we could use some assistance in making sure that the communication is being disseminated to all of our local governments as cleanly and as clearly as possible. It's understandably a complex bill. It's understandably has layers of funding requirements and performance measurements, but we're ready. We're ready with projects. We're ready to do the hard work. We really just need to have some assistance in learning how to access. I'm signed up for like 15 boot camps starting in January. So as a tourism director, I cannot overlook the value and the importance of placemaking. But before I go into that, I do want to mention affordable housing as infrastructure. Affordable housing plays a substantial and reinforcing role in local economic development. Without a sufficient supply of affordable housing, our employers and honestly, the entire regional economy, we have a competitive disadvantage given the subsequent difficulty to attract and retain qualified workers. So expanding opportunities for a housing's community workforce is critical to keeping and growing jobs in our region. And on a positive note, I do want to say that Culpeper has 2 affordable housing projects underway. People Inc. and Chaz, when combined, they're going to be bringing an additional 97 units into the market. And while that's very positive and we're very excited for that, and there's some really good regional and state money helping support that, even local money and local land. Thank you to town council and the county board of supervisors for that land donation. It's just the tip of the iceberg. And, affordable housing is really kind of that bottom tier. We need to saturate affordable housing so then we can create space and capacity at all the tiers that go above, so we can also see economic prosperity for our workforce and for our communities. So back to placemaking. We can have all the education, training in place, the roads, the utilities, everything can be a green light. Everything can be there. But if we don't have communities that people want to live in, they're not going to. So outdoor recreation, trails, parks, agritourism, small businesses, experiential retail, all play a critical role in the infrastructure of our communities. I know I'm running long, so I'm going to keep going quickly. Forgive me if I speak too fast. Just to touch on tourism in the creative class, we've been very fortunate here in Culpeper that our tourism economy has recovered and surpassed pre-pandemic numbers, representing 68.8 million in annual economic impact. And this truly reflects the hard work, the passion, and the dedication of our entrepreneurs and small business owners. And let me just say, it takes a lot of work to build a tourism economy, primarily because it is comprised of entrepreneurs and small businesses. I've been very fortunate that I've worked in tourism at the state and local level now, coming up on 16, 17 years. So I've seen it all, ups and downs. And in our role as local government, we really focus our efforts in supporting entrepreneurship in the creative class through education and access to capital. So again, back to the partners, back to those foundational needs and that support that we need at the state funding level to be able to empower our local entities to be able to then inject it into our doers, our people that are actually doing it, putting their life on risk and their families' lives at risk to invest into their small business, to bring something, whether it's a product or a service, to our communities. So we heavily rely on programs. DHC, a great example, is the Community Business Launch Program. We used that to create Culpeper Competes, which was very successful, and we're getting ready to offer the second round of Culpeper Competes this January. It's an entrepreneurship education competition program. We also work very closely with our Regional Small Business Development Center to provide a lot of that education, and we are super fortunate to have Rebecca Haydick and her team with Central Virginia. And then I cannot emphasize enough the value of community development financial institutions and community development enterprises. So I think it is one of the best things that the Commonwealth has done recently, that they created a CDFI fund. And I hope it'll grow, because CDFIs truly help small businesses, micro enterprises, and nonprofit organizations access funding that was previously very difficult to obtain. And I will note that they're even offering funding and opportunities to finance for affordable housing projects. So they serve more than one purpose in one category and sector. We work closely with Virginia Tourism to reach our out-of-market audiences and to drive that visitation, and the funding there is very critical so we can continue to bring those outside dollars into not just Culpeper and our region, but across the Commonwealth. We work with historic resources to preserve and protect our cultural and historically significant community assets. So a couple of quick community assets. The town of Culpeper is currently working on 2 new parks, Lakeview and Heritage Park, along with the new downtown parking lot with pedestrian bridge over the railroad to service our historic downtown Main Street area, the hub of activity, one of the primary drivers of why people visit Culpeper. And the county just had their grand opening of the Field House, a multi-use sports complex that will also become home to the future community Culpeper pool. And so all of these community assets that help position Culpeper as an attractive place to live, work, invest, and ultimately give back to our community, because those are the families that we want to attract to live here, that will represent that 2x population growth over the next 20 plus years. So 2 projects that I cannot finish today without highlighting. So the first is the future Culpeper Battlefield State Park. And I can't, there isn't a big enough thank you for all the support that we have received at the state level, this longtime support for our state park effort. This was one of the first projects I got involved in when I joined Culpeper 8 years ago, but there was like a decades plus worth of effort working towards this prior to my awareness of this. So this is a multi-decade project that we're here. We're at a new starting line. As you know, this park is going to be a long-term sustainable economic driver for Culpeper in our region. The park is going to build upon our existing preservation work that's been promoting our history and our recreational opportunities. So where we are, next steps, we are in the land transfer. The land transfer of the American Battlefield Trust and Brandy Station Foundation land to DCR. And while the process has begun, DCR does not have unlimited staff resources, so it's going to take a few years to transfer all 1,700 acres to the state. The initial focus will be to transfer Fleetwood Hill properties at Brandy Station in time for the official park opening on July 1st. And I want to note that the American Battlefield Trust is one of those like golden partners. They are the needle in the haystack, because part of this transfer and part of this agreement is that the American Battlefield Trust is going to maintain all of the lands through the end of calendar year 2027 at no cost to the department and the state. And so that's a really great, the value, it is measurable, but I won't get into those measurements right now. Concurrent to the steps of the land transfer process include DCR building and securing funding to staff the park and to help develop the park's infrastructure and assets. So staffing, parking lots, trails, camping, maybe some cabins. And this is going to require additional funding. And so this is where I actually do have some numbers to share. I know that DCR is looking at about $700,000 in the first year and closer to $500,000 in the second year. That's really going to be critical to be able to get us to this opening date in 2024. So we are advanced thanking you for continued support of our state park initiative. And I will say that thanks to the money that the legislator already appropriated for Culpeper earlier this year, we've now contracted on a critical 97-acre parcel, and you're looking at the map of Brandy Station, a critical 97-acre parcel that connects two halves of the Brandy Station battlefield. And this property, which was zoned for light industrial, would have been detrimental to the integrity and viability of the park had it been developed. So we are very grateful again for what the legislator has already appropriated for this project. And, we're really looking forward to celebrating the preservation of this critical parcel in time for the 160th anniversary of the battle in June of this coming year, 2023. Additionally, there are more parcels of land that the American Battlefield Trust and partners are looking to secure that will connect parts of the park and provide greater river access for those recreational opportunities and for that revenue generation within the park system. And so that's going to require additional funding, and we will be coming back to the state and to our partners to share those opportunities as they are finalized. And so I can't thank you enough. Virginia State Parks are revenue generators for their localities and the Commonwealth. Thank you again for supporting this project over the years and for the continued support as we move forward. Okay, one more project, and actually the next map is the map of Cedar Mountain. And there are some additional parcels there that are going to improve the visitor experience as well that we're looking to secure. So, and then the next project that I'm going to finish on is the George Washington Carver Agricultural Research Center, sometimes known as Carver Campus, sometimes known as GWAC. People can't pronounce the acronym, neither can I. But most specifically, the Food Enterprise Center. So created in 2014, the George Washington Carver Agricultural Research Center has a mission to sustain, strengthen, enhance agriculture and in the environment in Virginia's Northern Piedmont region. And that's really big because ag and forestry, just like tourism, we're in the top 3 industries across the Commonwealth. Ag and forestry, tourism, big industries at the state level, big industries for Culpeper. And the more we can do to support these industries and the continued investment of our private operators, the better our community will be. So the main activities in pursuit of this mission are in 4 separate areas. The Food Enterprise Center, which you see a concept rendering here of the Stone Soup Job Skills Training Program, back to workforce and training. Also the Food Security and Agriculture Working Group. So that really has a lot to do with food security, and there's really great work coming out of that. And then the research in conjunction with the Culpeper County Extension Office, Virginia State University Small Farms Program, Minority and Veteran Farmers of the Piedmont, and the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission. So programming at the Carver campus, specifically in these categories, are really primarily servicing the 5-county region of Culpeper, Fauquier, Madison, Orange, and Rappahannock. And I just want to note that recently the Food Enterprise Center has made very strong progress. Working with Laura Loveday in the county and her team, We have been very successful in getting Industrial Revitalization Fund grants, a Path Foundation grant, a Go Virginia grant. We were very grateful to the congressional earmarks through Congresswoman Spanberger's office for the new roof. And there has also been some privately secured funding for the Food Enterprise Center itself. So construction and rehabilitation of the 6,200 square foot facility is underway. And when it'll open, it will serve as a food and beverage manufacturing incubator, a training facility for value-added ag production and food safety, and so much more. So I just wanted to end on saying thank you again for the longtime support of this project and the Carver campus as a whole. And I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Paige. And we'll go to our legislators if there's any questions or any questions that could be typed in from Q&A for our attendees.
I think I went long. I apologize.
That's quite all right. If you have any questions, please quickly type it in the Q&A. If you're one of the delegates or one of the senators, please feel free to ask any questions. But once again, a wealth of information from Paige, and I think it just shows how viable Culpeper County is, the town. You mentioned all of the projects that we have happening here. So I think it's just
I mentioned a fraction of the projects.
just a fraction of what we have happening here in Culpeper County. So
Thank you.
if we have a question, please type it in Q&A. We will try to revisit that because we do want to keep moving. So we do have a question. So Tish Smith does ask about who decides affordable housing and should that be revisited?
Well, I don't decide affordable housing. So that's a great question. And the definition of affordable housing, from what I understand, there are layers of definitions of affordable housing that have to do with median income, that have to do with AMI. Actually, Patrick Money is on today. Patrick is a little bit more in tune with some of those qualification criteria that help define what is affordable housing. When it comes to supporting affordable housing projects, the state did open up a set of funding that was then disseminated into the regional planning districts. So that funding did come to the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission. And from there, the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission board received proposals from all 5 counties, and they evaluated those proposals based on core performance metrics and what it was going to do to meet the demands of those specific communities. And so there was a myriad of criteria that they reviewed in that, and then the board made a recommendation to which projects would receive what level of funding. And we were fortunate that 2 projects in Culpeper did receive regional funding. One of those projects also did receive local support in the formation of transfer of land in the town. And it was the bulk of the land was owned by Culpeper County, with a portion of the land owned by the town. And both town council and the county board of supervisors, through a series of public hearings and meetings, really reviewed that project and assessed the value for the community and made that positive decision to partner with People Inc. and Chaz in support of those projects. So I don't know if I answered it completely. There's a lot there. That conversation it's more than an elephant. It's a big conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Paige. And we do have one more question that is coming from Josh Haley. As a recent transplant Culpeper from Alexandria, what specific efforts were made to reach people who don't currently live in Culpeper to move here?
Well, the chamber is a great source of information. The visitor center, if they're looking just to move here, we have a lot of skilled real estate professionals. Tish, one of our previous question askers, they have a lot of resources. I guess it would really come down to what information they're looking for. Are they looking to relocate businesses? Are they looking to get jobs here? What categories? So all things that we can address offline.
Thank you, Paige. We greatly appreciate all the information and your wisdom. Is always a pleasure to hear from you on behalf of economic development and tourism. So thank you once again. We will move along to Virginia Kuntz from Freedom Street Partners. Virginia is one of my mentors. She was the board chair when I started in 2020 and has just been a wealth of information dealing with financial details. And she's going to be presenting today on behalf of business taxes and what our businesses and nonprofits and other organizations can be expecting coming from the General Assembly in 2023. Jenny, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, so I'm going to go behind Paige, who just has a wealth of knowledge of our local locality and what's going on in Culpeper, and take a little more of a general broad perspective for our businesses, and especially from the federal level. So let me bring up my presentation here. And all right, so I want to spend some time today really kind of going through business and tax impacts, the financial impacts that we will potentially see in the new General Assembly session coming up here shortly. So federal legislation right now, the big one on the table is the Secure Act. We call it Secure Act 2.0. Secure Act 1 initially came through in 2020. I know we're still getting IRS interpretations and guidelines on how to implement even the Secure Act from 3 years ago, and we'll continue to get some of that into 2023. So there are some moving targets there. But the basis of the Secure Act on the federal level is to get people to save more for retirement, improve retirement rules, and lower the employer cost of setting up a retirement plan. The big pieces with this and on a national level, we do have such a big gap in financial literacy in our country, as well as retention. And it goes back to the workforce and the labor dilemma that we've been hearing about today, which is a stressor on our businesses. So some of this could even help employers maintain some costs and some retention to their employers and help them have better lives as well. But some of the key things that impact on businesses that are coming down from the Secure Act 2.0 is to enable employers their 401k contributions to their employees that are making student loan payments. So this would be something new. Most of the time, employers are matching. So as an employee, I would have to contribute to get my employer match. And this would incentivize, and allow more savings for your employees, for employers to make those contributions to those continuing to pay down their student loans, and kind of help them catch up in that savings realm. Matching contributions from employers are, as of now, pre-tax, meaning that taxes are not paid on those contributions. In the House bill, they are looking at allowing this to be an elected request or choice from the employee to become Roth contributions from the employer. So, we will wait and see exactly how the tax piece of that, since taxes will be paid up front, and how that will be covered. But it would be an assumption that the tax would be on the employee and still be a positive piece for employers. The House bill also is looking at auto enrollment into 401k plans. This will decrease cost in 401ks, and it ensures that employees are beginning to save a little bit more for retirement, starting at 3% contributions from employees and then working its way up to 10%. So the Senate bill is not right now requiring or mandating auto enrollment, but they are looking at additional incentives for businesses that are enacting that auto enrollment to 401ks. And then another piece to this that could impact businesses is part-time employees. So if you have part-time employees who have at least 500 hours over 2 consecutive years, they would be eligible for the 401k plan and the matching, which is a little bit different than right now. It's mostly full-time employees are eligible. Companies do tend to have some flexibility, and 401ks are not the only retirement plans available. So there are a lot of small business retirement plans that I specifically work on with a lot of my clients here, especially in town and locally in Virginia, because one of cost and two, the flexibility to participate and encourage participation from their employees. So not only do we have impact on businesses, but there are some big impacts on individuals. We've, again, from the 2020 Secure Act, we've been waiting on some required minimum distribution interpretations for inherited retirement plans. The interesting thing about required minimum distributions is it has the highest tax penalty if you do not take it out, and that's on our seniors. So it's currently at 50% tax penalty for failing to take out your required minimum distribution. And right now in the bills, we're looking at reducing that to 25%. So that would be something that I think would be very beneficial to our seniors. They may have something going on and fail to take it in that 1 year. So another potential increase to catch up contributions for employees. The interesting piece about this is also the taxability of catch up. So currently it is pre-tax. You can elect to do Roth for your catch up, which just allows you at age 50 or above. And in these two bills, we're looking at, expanding the age to 60 for even greater catch up contributions and savings to your retirement plans. Would be right now being proposed that it would be 100% Roth contributions. So being taxed today versus taxed in the future to raise a little revenue. So the final thing, which everyone always asks me when they come in is there a way to find my lost 401ks or my lost retirement plans? I worked somewhere when I was 16, 18 years old and started saving, $25 a month, and I have no idea what happened to it. Well, both bills are looking at creating a national online lost and found database for retirement plans, which is very beneficial for individuals and employees. So I think the big piece also is just what other potential legislation and items are on the table, stressors to our businesses. Cryptocurrency, it's been in the news a lot lately and recently with FTX, but we are looking to see some US and global response and regulation on cryptocurrencies and what that might look like. The other piece as a financial planner and a CFP that we really spend a lot of time on now, nearing getting closer to the sunset date of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. This would revert the changes that were enacted in 2018 back to before 2018, 2019. So some big pieces with that is the tax rates for individuals, estate trusts, and business taxes would revert prior. So for our businesses specifically, what we're looking at is we're at 21% corporate tax right now. That would revert back to 35%. So also with this, we also have Biden's plan that he put forward sort of the middle of the year last year on tax proposals that he would like to see. And one of that is raising the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28. So looking at those things and understanding that these are topics that are being discussed and on the table that could impact our businesses who are still struggling after COVID, especially with workforce and our labor. They also are fighting high inflation. The cost of their supplies, cost to do business has significantly increased this year, especially for my small businesses that I talk with and work with in the community, and as well as just retention of employees, because of the cost of everything. Everyone needs more money to live individually. And so incentivizing with higher wages has also been a burden on some of our smaller businesses, especially locally. So we do follow these things and really try to help our businesses, our communities work through what options are there, and then what is coming down the pipeline or potentially, so that we can plan effectively to help them down the road. Other pieces of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that, you know, are a big a big change that would revert back would be the standard deduction, personal exemption, excess business loss limitations, the estate and gift tax exemption would revert back to where now it's over 12-15 million, would revert back to 5 million or less. So that could affect quite a bit more people as far as the tax exemption there. Credit for employer paid family and medical leave. And then there is a new deduction for pass-through income for non-corporate taxpayer, which has been nice to see and helpful for our businesses. The other pieces I think that we are hearing that could be on the table that are up for discussion, you know, from our legislators is looking at unrealized capital gains and just the capital gains rates, you know, in full. They're currently at the lowest rates that they have ever been. And so increasing those types of rates, not only on individuals, but on the investments of companies, you could see less investment. And some of this also goes back into, you know, one of the stressors, the labor stressor, and Dr. Gullickson and Paige really spent some time on workforce. You know, we have lost a lot of our 16 to 25-year-old demographics from joining the labor force. And those were our entry-level jobs. So they've put, you know, some solutions on the table that are fantastic, but just like what Dr. Gullickson said, is it's probably going to take some business investment to continue that initiative into growing that middle job section, skilled job section, especially in Virginia. So allowing, you know, the tax changes, not only in Virginia, but federally, for that business investment, potentially incentives to make those investments in their communities to improve their labor and workforce could be extremely beneficial in partnering in such a way between business and government. So I like the piece that where Dr. Gullickson really said it's going to take both investments there, but we want to make sure it's available and businesses can make those investments. So there are a couple other things I just wanted to go over. Another piece, and this actually affects me personally, is the Department of Labor's independent contractor rule on October 13th. Really, the Department of Labor proposed the rule that would eliminate the 2021 rule. So we do understand that this rule is really to not harm many of worker classifications that should be in, you know, taken care as employees in the companies. But, you know, then we get wrapped up if we completely revert the 2021 rule back to where I've made a choice to be an independent contractor and I am backed by Raymond James because of compliance and regulations. And it's extremely hard to do that and costly to do that on your own. And I know there are other industries as well that are potentially could have to change their business model if we completely reverted back to the, you know, before the 2021 rule. So this is a big piece of what I'm hearing from, especially from gig economy. You know, we had some clarity through the 2021 rule that allowed us again by choice to be independent contractors. So really looking back at that and being sure that it's modified, this Department of Labor independent contractor rule, so that choice is, kind of restored and given back to those of us that are doing this, and making the decision to become independent contractors. So as far as state legislation, a couple business tax changes that have come through this year. A lot happened in Virginia. There were a lot of tax changes that came through both business and personal. So I just wanted to highlight a few. In Virginia specifically, we had an increase in income tax deduction for certain disallowed business interests, went up to 30%. Also, we adopted a new elective pass-through entity tax, which was beneficial for some of our businesses that had pass-through income. We had an updated definition of taxable accommodations as far as living and hotels, and whether or not the tax would be the same for renting a conference room and things like that. So important things there. And there is a full comprehensive list that you can find at tax.virginia.gov. So if you're interested in seeing all the different tax changes that came out and were established in 2022 in Virginia, definitely go there. I will say one specific one that we have done and worked with many of our clients have been the state income tax can now be paid through your business. So it's a deduction for the business. It reduces their federal tax, but can be paid through the business versus the pass through the personal. So that has been a benefit for many businesses that we have seen this year. Other things that are expected that have just been, kind of recently brought up and potentially could be on the table for expected proposals. We had the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission in Virginia. They were directed to study just the progressivity of Virginia's individual income tax system. So currently in Virginia, the bracket structure, the income bracket structure was adopted in 1990 and hasn't been changed since. So, just is that an area of concern? Is that something that we should be looking at? And there were other Virginia taxes as well, just looking at grocery tax, gas tax, and carbon tax that could potentially be on, become a priority for discussion this year. So just trying to keep everyone aware of those types of things going on. So I think that is pretty much what I have on a high level for our businesses and our community as far as taxes and what could potentially be on the table. Do I have any questions?
Jenny, I just want to say thank you again. A wealth of information, no pun intended, with wealth management being your specialty. So thank you once again. If anybody does have any questions, please type them in the Q&A, and we'll also be sharing out her PowerPoint presentation so you can review that at your own leisure as well. So one quick last call for the legislators on the call if they have any questions for Jenny.
No, I would just say thank you for the presentation. You bring up some really good points, especially with respect to tax policy, regulatory policy, and I mean minimum wage policy. When you make it twice as expensive to hire entry-level labor, that's going to have a huge impact both on the people seeking jobs and the people trying to provide them, especially within the small business sector. And I know that I'm really concerned with respect to what they've been trying to do with respect to independent contractors. And I think you gave the nicest, politest way. I think it was a little bit more deliberate. I think there's a lot of people that have a political interest in trying to really shut down a lot of the gig economy, which I think is unfortunate because it's a critical part. And like you said, a lot of people choose to do this. It's not that they were forced into it. It actually works best with their work-life balance, with their career, what they want to do. And we need to be able to protect people's ability to choose what works for them instead of having it regulated out of existence. And so we're very keen on trying to make sure that we protect people's options within the economy. The one thing that I would say is very helpful is when we are carrying this legislation, it would be great if we could kind of foster that communication so that we can make the best arguments possible as we're trying to explain why we need to give more freedom to both employees and employers in the marketplace, and kind of share some of those personal stories. So if we could have that line of communication, especially as kind of we get into the heat of session and these bills start going to subcommittee and full committee, we now have the ability to testify online. That was always a big impediment to a lot of people coming down and testifying, because you pretty much got to give up a whole day. And if the committee changes the schedule, the next thing you know, you got to come back the next day. So now we can do it all online. And I would really encourage people who are interested in being able to help us as we carry legislation that you're passionate about. But if you don't have the time to go to Richmond, please contact our office and we'll work with you to make sure to get you in the queue so you can testify online. But thank you very much for the information.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas.
Just real quick, I think Delegate Weber had something to say, but he's called in and is unsure how to unmute himself on his end. Is there any way someone can unmute him and then remute him, I guess, when he's done?
Sure. Delegate Weber, I think you've joined us here. Do you have a question for Ginny?
Well, not really a question. I guess in regards to some of the legislation or the tax issues that you see forward, there's a number of issues that get brought forth, and there's also there's always a delegate that wants to bring the estate tax, like have Virginia be an estate tax too. In regards to that, actually the question is, earlier when you were talking about the federal tax issues that were coming forward, you said that like for the estate tax, some of those exemptions that were up to 12 million will be dropped down to 12, and that the corporate income tax would also go up. Now, is that because they were sunsetted, and when is that sunset?
Yeah, so that is part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2018, which sunsets December 31st of 2025. So unless we start really communicating about that and discussing that and whether or not changes will be made or it will continue, we will revert back to what was prior tax law to that act starting 2026.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Delegate Weber, for joining us today and asking that question. Ginny, thank you so much for your presentation. Always a wealth of information, and I greatly appreciate it. We're going to move along to Katie Reams from CFC Farm and Home Center that have a little bit to do with everything agriculture in our community, whether that's large farms, small family farms, plants. They have a little bit of everything there at CFC, and Katie is very tied in with the agricultural legislation that is coming up. So Katie, I will pass it along to you and allow you to present on agriculture. Everybody, Katie Reams.
Thank you, Jeff. So first, I just want to thank everybody for attending today. And it looks like everybody is nice and warm and well fed, and everybody has clothes on. So I would like to thank the agriculture community for making all that happen. For those of you who are not aware, agriculture is the #1 industry in the state of Virginia, with over a $70 billion impact. Locally, Culpeper County, the current census data that's available is from 2017, which we all know what inflation has done. But just solely on the market value of crops that were sold, it was over $48 million in 2017. Culpeper County is the 3rd largest in horticulture production in the state. We also rank pretty high up there with cattle and crop production as well. So we are very much and a truly agriculture community here. So with that, there's always competition for different land uses. So I just would like to make the delegates and senators aware that aren't, which I know that you guys are very well versed in our agriculture industry here. But just to be aware of potential impacts that legislation might have on competitive uses for land. They're not making more of it. And there needs to be a balanced approach to economic growth while still keeping land viable for agriculture production. So with that, our watersheds are also extremely important, not only to agriculture production, but to society as general. So I would ask that you continue to support the funding for the ag best management practices. As you well know, last year is the first year that we were actually fully funded to try and meet those nutrient reduction loads. We would ask that you guys appropriate another 110 million to help with those best management practices, to have full funding, and also put some in the reserve when there's not there. During COVID and even post-COVID, there is still supply chain issues with getting products and even services lined up to be able to implement a lot of those best management practices. So we would ask for that continued support and funding. With that too, we would also ask that you support delaying the mandatory development and implementation of the nutrient management plans to July of 2030. There is not enough certified nutrient management planners in the state of Virginia to even begin to accomplish what is currently in legislation. With that also too, that does tie back into some of those nutrient or the best management practices as well. So it's just with COVID and everything else that's happened, it's just preposterous to even begin to think that we're going to accomplish those nutrient loads by 2025. We would also ask that you oppose any new employer mandates that would increase the cost and regulatory burdens and limit the ability for farms and agribusinesses to have a stable workforce. We all know that minimum wage is going up. We also know if you're in the ag industry, you're already paying well above minimum wage. If you can find workers, and I'm not even saying qualified workers, but workers. Dr. Gullickson talked about some of the programs there with Germana, and I hope one of those programs on her list is to have a CDL program if they do not, because there is a nationwide shortage and we all depend on all those CDL truck drivers to get goods and services. Everyone's aware of the railroad strikes that have been mentioned several times here over the last few months, and those CDL truck drivers are vital to our economy and our sole livelihood. If we don't have goods and services, we don't have food, we don't have heat, we don't have fuel. Those drivers are critical to keeping our economy and lives going. We would also ask that you oppose any legislative or regulatory proposals that would restrict the use of EPA and USDA approved pesticide and herbicides. Those products have allowed us to use better management practices on our farms while still protecting the environment and increasing soil health and productivity of the land. As several of you well know, less than 1.9% of the US population is involved in production agriculture, which is critical, obviously, to having food. So having those practices and tools in our toolbox to be able to use is critical to being able to keep producing more off of less land with less people to feed the nation and the world. We would also oppose any legislation that would restrict or prohibit aerial application of crop protectants. That obviously is not a cheap practice to do, and it's only done when weather has prohibited us from applying seed or crop protectants on those crops based on whether the land's too wet, crop's gotten too tall and you can't get over it with a high crop. Those tools are vital also for us to be able to produce agriculture products while maintaining soil health and production. We'd also like a lot of clarification on the unlicensed farm use vehicle program. And I know Delegate Freitas and Delegate Webert, you and I have talked about this extensively. So I don't feel the need to go into a whole lot there, but you guys are well with the issues with that. And the burden that it's placing on farmers, unfortunately, because of a few individual, well, I shouldn't even say a few, because of several individuals out there that have chosen to just go buy a set of farm use plates and slap it on their car and ride around and have no ties to agriculture production whatsoever. The Carver Center work that has been done there in funding, I would like to thank you guys very much for that. We still do have several large production farms here in Culpeper, but with the growth that we are seeing from outside of Culpeper and more people moving here because they love the rural characteristics of it, they are buying farmettes, smaller acreages, and producing food for themselves, and some even selling it. So that kitchen there at the Carver Center will be very beneficial for those types of operations to be able to produce food products to be able to have to sell. So thank you for your support of that. And then outside of that, that's all I got for now.
Katie, thank you so much. We will open it up to our legislators to ask any questions that they may have. And if anybody else has any questions, you can type that in the Q&A for Katie really quickly. And Delegate Freitas, I see you've unmuted yourself. Do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say thank you very much. I mean, I just do what Katie tells me to do anyway, so this should be easy. But no, I appreciate the information, and as always, I really appreciate that Katie's always been willing to come out and reach out to us with specific use cases and examples that we can use as we're crafting the arguments for the legislation. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Katie, thank you once again. And I think that was a wonderful point about how people are moving to Culpeper and are having their own farmettes, and some of them are selling them. So be able to connect with those folks is agriculture is a very broad subject. So I think that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. So Katie Reams from CFC Farm and Home Center, thank you so much for speaking on behalf of agriculture. Now we will end the day with Tammy LaGraff from the Culpeper Free Clinic. Tammy is amazing director of the Culpeper Free Clinic. She's going to be speaking about access to healthcare and insurance as she sees a lot of our community come through her doors looking for help, looking for access to healthcare, and being able to provide that with partnerships that she has in our community is incredible. So on behalf of access to healthcare insurance, allow me to introduce Tammy LaGraff from the Culpeper Free Clinic. Tammy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. And definitely a big thank you for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to talk not only about our clinic, but just the issue of access to healthcare, because it is so important to all of us. And I think that if we have learned one thing during COVID, it is our interconnectivity and the importance of health on a community, not just an individual basis, but how there is such a chain reaction to even one individual having health needs that are costly or affect so many other people. And we have seen that quite a bit with our patients. And I know you've all seen it within your families and community. I've been the director, lucky enough to be the director of the Free Clinic since February of 2020. My favorite job ever, I gotta say. We moved here probably 4 years ago. I worked at the health department for a little while. And this community has been so incredibly welcoming, and we have so many ties here already, and we love it here. And it is just a great community with great people. So I'm going to talk about our clinic, which again, I love our clinic and everything that we do here. But I also am going to reiterate quite a bit that access to healthcare for everyone, as our patients are really lucky in that we don't charge them for the healthcare that we give them. A lot of people are not so lucky. And, with the cost of everything and the effects of COVID, I think that that access becomes more and more difficult. So, I got to share my screen. We practiced and everything. Maybe. There we go. Okay. So again, I have been the director here for almost 3 years. I arrived about a month before COVID did, and they have not forgiven me yet for that. So our clinic has actually had its 30th anniversary this year. It was started by some local physicians who are still here, still involved with our clinic, and still, some of them still practicing in our community. They were concerned about patients that they were seeing who did not have health care and were having a great difficulty paying for their health care and medications. So they started a clinic one night a month in the health department basement. And it soon grew and moved here to this site that we're in now, and we are open 4 days a week. We have a few guidelines for our patients to be eligible for our clinic services, and that is that they have to be 18 years old, they have to be a Culpeper County resident, they cannot have any other health insurance, and then there's some strict income guidelines that they have to follow. So at this point, we are looking at 300% of the federal poverty guidelines for income or less. And there's a little guideline there that gives you kind of an idea of what that is per household size. So one person, for example, would have to make at 40,770 or below to qualify for our services. We're going to talk a little bit about the programs that we are able to get free medications for some of our patients, and they look at these guidelines very carefully, that we are following them very carefully. They come in and audit us yearly. In fact, I'm in the middle of an audit through Merck right now, who gives us quite a bit of our diabetes medications, and they look at all of the information that we look at to make sure that we are following these guidelines to receive that medication for free. In 2021, 67% of our clinic patients fell below the 150% of the federal poverty guidelines, which is really low. It means that they make very little. We did recently increase. We were at 250% of the federal poverty guidelines, which you can see the difference there. We just increased, and there was a couple reasons for that. We saw that there was an opportunity to increase access to more of our community members, but also one of the things that we saw during COVID, and this kind of reflects back on some of the workforce issues that we've discussed today, is that some of our patients who work in food service, especially food service, were unable to work their normal hours because of the low amount of workers that they had. So they were working so much overtime that they started making too much to qualify for us. So patients that were established here would come in because they recertify yearly with their income, and they would come back and they would be making too much. And that was all based on overtime hours because of the workforce issues. So we felt like it was time to increase those levels a little bit so that we didn't lose existing patients, and again, open up access for more people in the community. Our clinic budget is just over $500,000, and we receive approximately a third of that is covered through state and some county funds, and the rest is covered through grants and donations that we receive. We have a small staff of 9 wonderful healthcare providers and administrative people, and they work so hard and they are wonderful, and I cannot brag about them enough. Our clinic provides free medical care, prescriptions, and we are very lucky in that some of the other clinics in the state that we collaborate with do not have this service, but our hospital, Culpeper Hospital, provides free lab work and imaging to our patients. And anyone who has received either a copay or an actual bill for lab work or imaging knows how expensive that can be. So we are very, very grateful to them for that. Again, our goals are to increase access to healthcare, engage people in their healthcare. Some of our patients who come here have had very little experience with going to the doctor. They have very low health literacy. They do not even understand how to read a prescription bottle. So we spend a lot of time educating and trying to make sure that people understand their healthcare, are able to advocate for themselves, ask good questions. And another one of our big goals is to decrease emergency visits and hospitalizations. This was really important, obviously, during COVID, when our hospitals were overrun with people who had COVID. And we had to make sure that we were keeping people here and addressing their healthcare needs so that they didn't end up in the hospital emergency rooms, in the hospital, and decreasing that overall burden on our healthcare facilities here. Let's see if we can go to the next one. We do have a small licensed pharmacy on site and a small formulary, which is the list of medications that we can get. We do not have any controlled medications, and a lot of our medications are donated through programs such as RX partnerships, AmeriCares, or actual medication pharmaceutical companies like Novo Nordisk. We do purchase some as well. RX partnerships and AmeriCares are relief agencies, basically, especially AmeriCares. They will come in and help with disasters, but they also donate to charitable programs like ours. And we do not take prescriptions from the outside, so people cannot come in and bring us a prescription that they got somewhere else and we fill it, so we can't do that. In 2021, we filled close to 5,000 prescriptions, and you'll see the value there of those prescriptions. And RX partnerships donated approximately a couple thousand of those medications, and there's the value of their donation to us. Our clinic purchased medications. We go through a Cardinal program where we get a little bit of a discount, and we spent $8,700 in 2021, and we are right about on the same path this year, as you can see by what we've spent year to date. We also have a medication assistance program out of our clinic for our patients, and how that works is we have a social worker who comes a couple of afternoons a week, and she works with the patient to go through and fill out all of the applications to get medications directly from the drug companies. And the reason for that is some of these medications, as we're going to talk about on the next slide, are so expensive. First of all, our patients could never afford them. Second of all, we can't afford to buy them. And the other companies, such as RX partnerships, could not access them. They're very expensive medications. So we are able to access those through this medication assistance program. And this is something that's available through a few of our free clinics here in the state. And it is a huge help, especially for diabetes medications, insulins, and things like that. Our medication assistance program has about 60 active patients of our clinic patients. And so far this year, we've filled 201 prescriptions through that, and $68,000 roughly is the cost of those. So you can see the costs on this slide of medications, and you know what that means for our clinic to be able to get these medications for free. But our patients are very lucky to be able to access these programs, and believe me, they know it and are so grateful. But you know, this is again a huge cost for people to maintain their health. So just some basic information about our clinic patients. Last year, we had 591 duplicated patients, and we're again about on track to have the same again this year. And you'll see in 2019, we were at 572. And then during the pandemic, we did have lower amounts in 2020. New patients, we had 267 last year. We're a little lower this year, and I think that that's related to some Medicaid applications that we're going to talk about. We average around 25 new patients a month. We had just over 2,000 visits last year, and I think we're pretty close to that this year again. The social worker who does come to us twice a week also helps us fill out Medicaid applications. So if a new patient walks in and we look at their income and we think that they can possibly be eligible for Medicaid, we have her work with them and fill out an application right here. And she can usually run that through very quickly. We also can help outside people, not just our patients, get that service. She is willing to fill out those applications with anyone who walks in the door. And we do that sometimes. And I do think we are very lucky in our relationship with the Department of Social Services, so they help us have this social worker on site. And she does a tremendous job getting these applications through. And I really think that is part of why we have some lower new patient numbers, is we would bring them in to have them apply for us, but then as soon as we see their eligibility, we move them on through her. So I think that has helped quite a bit. And we have this year, as you can see the difference, last year in 2021, we had 102 applications completed and 28 were approved. This year so far, we've had 87 applications completed and 66 approved. So there again, she is really helping a lot of people get the Medicaid benefit. Now, we all know that the Medicaid emergency Medicaid benefit will probably end soon. We're not exactly sure. We've received that 60-day notice, alert a couple of times, but when it does end, we are expecting to have quite a bit of extra patients come our way who will be now no longer eligible for Medicaid. So this will, again, it's very important. We have an outreach work where we try to get the word out there so people know we're here for when that happens, as well as just every day. It will also impact dental care. We have a lot of people who receive dental care through Medicaid, and I can't underplay how important dental care is to your overall health. I know people hear this all the time, but just, having good oral hygiene, having good just routine care, let alone having the ability to take care of an emergent problem when it comes up, is huge. In our chronic illnesses that we're going to talk a little bit about, having dental care is so important. You can get bacterial infections that can really hurt a person's overall health in a big way, huge impact. So the most common conditions that we see here at the free clinic are the usuals that probably most family practice offices see: high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes. GERD is a huge one. And, people think, well, GERD, that's, a little bit of acid reflux, but over time that can be very serious, and it can cause what we call esophageal varices, where people can bleed and have difficulty with nutrition. And again, huge impact on your overall health. Anxiety, well, in the climate with COVID and everything else, we have seen quite a bit of anxiety, and we are able to refer people to the CSB for behavioral health treatment. So we're happy about that. We also deal with whatever other acute conditions come up, from sore throats to earaches to, small injuries. Sometimes we do have to send people to the emergency room from here, but we try to, again, keep as much in-house as we can to keep people out of that healthcare system. The most common employment of our patients are food service, cleaning, agricultural, tree service, construction. We have quite a few small business owners who cannot afford healthcare. We have students, we have caregivers. So we have, we try to make sure people understand that, working doesn't mean that you can't come to the free clinic. A lot of these people cannot access healthcare through their jobs, and we want them to know they can come here as long as they meet those eligibility requirements for income. So again, when we think about these chronic conditions, especially if they are untreated, the impact on our community are, individuals whose blood sugar is out of whack or their blood pressure is too high, if they end up in the hospital or losing work, we have a lot of workforce issues already from COVID. There's the burden on the hospital, and we know the hospital is still struggling right now with all the respiratory things that are going around between COVID and the flu and RSV. We really need to keep our members of our community healthy and make sure they have access to healthcare and medications and, any way to keep everyone functioning and productive. Medication costs, it's just some general information because I think it's always shocking to me, even as a nurse for 30 some years, at the cost of medications. So these are some of the medications that we probably prescribe the most. And for diabetes medications, it's Janumet, and we are able to get that donated through RX partnerships, but that would be the cost for Janumet, anywhere from $600 to $700 a month. We do use good RX cards, and I encourage people to use those. You can get a little bit of a discount, but that's still a very expensive med, even with a good RX card. Metformin is one of our more affordable medications that we use for diabetes. But again, we have to be able to make sure that people are doing their part to manage their diet, their exercise, monitoring their blood sugars, all of that. The education piece is huge to make sure that people don't have to move up to insulin, which is extremely expensive. So, for example, Lantus, $100 a pen. Some people might use 1 pen a month. Some people might use 3 or 4 pens a month. Ozempic that you see advertised, which is an excellent medication, is really for people who have very uncontrolled blood sugars, very high A1Cs, $1,000 a month easily. We are able to get some of that donated, and again, we send that through our medication assistance program. Blood pressure meds, again, a little better in price, but again, if our patients had to choose between paying $40 a month or food for their family, or, it's tough. And frankly, with the price of everything with inflation, I think it's not just our patients that are struggling with choices like that. Cholesterol meds always tend to be a little more expensive. And again, we encourage the good RX use if we can't get some of those. But for the most part, we can get them. We can get them donated. But for the average person, that just gives you an idea of how much that would cost. And the coordination of use with good RX is a little complicated. Certain pharmacies take it, certain pharmacies, you have to get a hold of them, you have to get prescriptions there. So it's a little complicated, but just something to consider. Some of the things, other things that we're doing here at our clinic to, again, try to keep people as healthy as possible is we have some gardens that we put in, some garden boxes, and we're growing our own vegetables that we try to have available. We have connections with local growers, minority and veteran farmers, the Piedmont, who are out of that Carver school, help us quite a bit if they have surplus, they bring it to us. Our patients love the fresh vegetables. And we recently partnered to get a grant through the Virginia Department of Health to hire a community health worker who does screening for social determinants of health on all our patients as they come in. And basically that's looking at, do you have food? Do you have housing? Are you in a safe situation in your house? You know, any questions like that, that we can immediately collaborate with other community resources to get them services immediately. We have great community resources in this community, I have to say. And so, you know, the idea is that if someone is struggling to get food, they're not going to worry about their medications. They can't pay for their medications, or they're not going to worry about taking them. They're focused on getting food. They're focused on having safe housing. So we try to make sure that other needs are being met for our patients. We have disease management classes. We have individual and group classes. We are very focused on our connection with literacy volunteers and trying to make sure that people have the ability to either learn English or learn to read. We do see people who cannot read, obviously. We put up a little library this year to try and encourage that with adults and children in our community. And we have quite a few people who use it, and we do get donations of books quite a bit. And one of the other things I forgot to put on here is that we do quite a bit of precepting and connection with Germana for student nurses who come and do clinical here or come and do volunteer hours here. Some nurse practitioners will come and do hours here. So we can again make more connections with other programs for education and just, you know, being a part of this community. So I think that was pretty much it. I just wanted to make sure that you understood how I feel about access to healthcare. And please feel free to contact me if you have any questions about our clinic or anything else. I'm more than happy to talk to you. And if you know of anyone who needs our services, send them our way.
Tammy, thank you so much. You are such a valuable resource in our community, and we're so thankful to have you as a partner. I'll open it up to questions from our legislators, and if anybody else has any questions in the attendees, please type that in the Q&A right now. But once again, Tammy, thank you so much for all of your insight.
Thank you.
And any questions from our legislators? And I don't see any questions from our public. I think a lot of people are aware of what the free clinic does, but hopefully if they weren't, they are now aware. And there's opportunities for volunteering. There's opportunities to support at the Oyster Fest, which is the first Saturday in October. And Amy and I had a wonderful time helping out with that this year. So we look forward to folks being able to connect with Tammy and the free clinic that way. Once again, we want to thank Germana Community College as our signature sponsor. We want to thank our legislative sponsor, Culpeper Star Exponent. And I would like to take this opportunity really quick to see if Delegate Nick Freitas or James from Bryce Reeves' office would like to make any comments. I know Delegate Weaver was with us, but I believe he had to run. So if there's anything from our legislators, if you would like to make any comments, now is the time.
Well, I generally like to wait for the legislators to speak, but I don't see that Nick has unmuted himself. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of our presenters today, and then I look forward to sitting down with Bryce and going over my notes from today's meeting with him.
Thank you, James. Delegate Freitas.
Again, thank you all very much for the time that you put in all these presentations. Again, the best thing that we can do is make our offices available, especially as we're crafting legislation. The pre-file deadline is passed. However, there's still the ability to get bills in. And so we would love to work with you in order to figure out what sort of legislation would be appropriate, what sort of budget amendments would be appropriate. So again, thank you for the effort that you put into all of your presentations. And we certainly look forward to working with you, not only during the legislative session, but after that as well, because as soon as all of this is done, we go right back into implementation. And then when we get into July, we'll be starting the pre-filing process for the following year. And so the more that we can have the back and forth communication, the better the legislation can be. And you guys provide just invaluable insight, because I've said this before, you guys help us make sure that what looks good on paper in Richmond actually works well in the real world. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Once again, thank you to all of our presenters today. Wonderful presentations, great information. Once again, thank you to our signature sponsor, Germanna Community College, our legislative sponsor, the Culpeper Star Exponent. And I want to wish everybody a happy holidays from us here at the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining our 2022 Legislative Conference. Have a great day.